In what feels like the blink of an eye, the world is suddenly staring down a brand new global crisis. A conflict that many thought was, sort of contained has absolutely set the Middle East on fire. And the fallout? Well, it's already hitting us thousands of miles away. So what on earth is happening and how did we get here so fast?
And hey, if you're thinking this is all happening somewhere far away, think again. Just look at the price of oil. It shot past $100 a barrel. Now, that's not just some number for traders on Wall Street, that's a shockwave that's about to hit the entire global economy. It's a pretty stark reminder that what happens over there, well, it has a very direct impact on all of our lives.
And it's not just the markets that are freaking out either. This warning right here, it comes from a United Nations Security Council report that was just issued. I mean, when the top diplomats on the planet start using language this strong, that is a huge red flag telling you just how bad things have really gotten.
So, how did we get to the brink so fast? That's the big question, right? To get it, we really need to understand the key events, who the major players are, and what's at stake for the whole world. So, that's what we're going to do. Unpack what's happening, why it all started, and maybe most importantly, what it means for every single one of us.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll dig into why the world is so on edge. Then, we're going to trace this whole thing back to the single spark that lit the fuse. After that, we'll look at how the fighting has spread, how it turned into a war on global oil, and the diplomatic showdown happening at the UN. And finally, we'll tackle that crucial question, where do we go from here?
So let's just dive right in with the immediate global fallout. This is not just some regional skirmish. The speed and the scale of this thing have put the entire world on high alert. But to really get a handle on those consequences, we have to go back to the beginning. We need to understand how this all started. What was the spark that ignited this absolute firestorm? Okay, so everything really kicked off on February 28th with a series of massive escalations. First, the US and Israel launched this huge assault on Iran called Operation Epic Fury. Then, in a move with just unbelievable repercussions, a strike killed Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei. And tragically, reports also came out that a strike hit an elementary school in Minab, killing 175 people, most of them kids. Since March 1st, Iran and its allies have unleashed a sweeping retaliation, and the violence has just been spiraling upwards ever since.
And that retaliation has completely transformed this thing. It's now a multi-front war being fought on land, at sea, and in the air, and it's happening across a whole bunch of countries.
So what you're seeing here is this really dangerous back and forth. On one side, you have the US and Israel. Their stated goal is to take apart Iran's military. They've hit over 5,500 targets and are even expanding operations into Lebanon. In response, Iran and its allies have launched their own multi-front retaliation. We're talking missile and drone attacks on at least 7 different nations, hundreds of rockets flying into Israel, and a huge campaign targeting commercial ships and US military bases.
And to really get a sense of the American position here, just listen to this quote from President Trump. The language, it makes it crystal clear this isn't seen as some limited surgical operation. No, this is being framed as a campaign of absolutely overwhelming and sustained force.
But behind all the military strategy and the big talk, there is a devastating and very real human cost. An estimated 1,300 civilians have reportedly been killed in Iran. The fighting has spilled over into Lebanon with incredible force. Over 600 people killed and more than 800,000 families forced to flee their homes. And the tragedy is just captured in these individual moments, like an Israeli strike in Beirut that killed 8 displaced people who were just sheltering on the city's seaside walkway, a place they had run to, thinking they'd be safe.
Now, this conflict isn't just being fought with bombs and rockets. It's also a war on the global economy. And ground zero for that fight is the Strait of Hormuz.
So why is this little strip of water such a big deal? Well, get this, it is the world's most important choke point for oil. A full 20% of the entire world's oil supply flows right through here. To mess with the Strait of Hormuz is basically to hold the global economy hostage.
And yep, that is precisely what's happening. Iran and its allies are hitting the economic heart of the region, and they're hitting it hard. We've seen fuel tankers set on fire in Iraqi waters, which forced Iraq to shut down its oil ports completely. Fuel tanks in Bahrain, oil facilities in Oman, all struck. And it's not just oil. Drones have caused major damage at international airports in Dubai and Kuwait.
Iran is being incredibly open about this strategy. This quote from an Iranian military spokesperson, that's not just a threat. That's a flat-out declaration of economic warfare. They're drawing a direct line from their military actions to a future where oil costs $200 a barrel, a number that would absolutely crush economies all over the world.
So you've got this intense battle playing out on the water. Iran has been laying naval mines and hitting commercial ships, and it's had a massive effect. Maritime traffic through the strait has dropped by an almost unbelievable 97%. Now, the U.S. naval response has been swift and severe. They've destroyed 16 Iranian mine-laying ships, sunk over 60 other naval vessels. U.S. Central Command is now saying they've neutralized a big chunk of Iran's navy.
Okay, so with the military and economic fronts just raging, let's switch gears and look at the diplomatic battle, where the rest of the world is scrambling to figure out what to do at the UN Security Council.
So on March 11th, the Security Council gets together for an emergency session. They've got 2 different resolutions on the table. And how this vote goes, well, it tells you everything you need to know about the deep and dangerous cracks in the international community's response to this whole thing.
So let's look at that first vote on Resolution 2817. You can see it passes by a landslide. 13 nations in favor, nobody against. But, and this is a big but, look at the 2 abstentions, China and Russia. That's the key detail here.
So why did one resolution pass and the other just fizzle out? It all comes down to what they chose to focus on. Resolution 2817, which was pushed by Bahrain and other Gulf states, condemned Iran's attacks, but it didn't say a word about the initial US-Israeli strikes. The Russian draft, on the other hand, was much broader. It called for a stop to all military activities from everyone. So the first resolution passed, and it put Iran in a diplomatic corner. The second one failed, and it just showed how divided the Security Council really is.
And all of this brings us to that final critical question. What happens next? The really sobering answer is that the entire region is just standing on the edge of a cliff.
And listen, nobody seems to be hitting the brakes. In fact, all the signs are pointing toward a much wider war. The US and Israel have publicly sworn to keep going until all objectives are met. Israel is moving offensive ground troops back to its border with Lebanon, which could mean a ground invasion is coming. And Iran has issued its own warnings. Then you have this really worrying development. Western intelligence is reporting that Russia is now sharing advanced drone tactics with Iran, making that partnership even stronger.
This quote from the U.S. representative to the UN really nails a huge geopolitical shift that's happening. Iran's actions have completely realigned the region, basically pushing countries that were historic rivals to suddenly unite against a common enemy.
So here we are. The diplomatic path is a mess. All sides are doubling down, not backing down. And it leaves us with this one terrifyingly urgent question: what on earth is it going to take to pull the Middle East, and maybe the rest of the world, back from the brink?